Hello and welcome to another podcast from Odell Technology. This morning we're joined by Ketil Widerberg, who is the General Manager of the Oslo Cancer Cluster. Hello, Ketil.
Hello, Stephen. Nice to meet you.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you again. Ketil, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind telling the audience a little bit about your background, your professional background, and how you ended up where you are today, please.
Yes, I can do that. So my background is that I spent a decade in biotech industry developing treatment for cancer with photodynamic therapy. And that was the biotech company Photocure, where I worked in many roles, but most interesting, I work also with how you do licensing deals between biotech and pharma companies, and also how you make this relationship works. So that led me out to more international companies. Salix Pharmaceutical was one deal we made in US. And then I switched. So I started working in the software industry with, what could you say, artificial intelligence, because it was named like that. And the company I worked for, we built up a system for international trade systems. We bought up some companies, and eventually we got acquired from Descartes, a Canadian company. And with that experience from both software and from the biotech industry, I had the opportunity to join as the head of Oslo Cancer Cluster. And to me, that was especially interesting because you see what really, we started then to see that what's driving this industry is also how you understand data and how you can use those data to progress your ideas to make a difference for patients. And this convergence of biotech and software is really one of the key interesting parts we see in Oslo Cancer Cluster today that will drive the innovation pace in oncology.
So let's talk about the Cancer Cluster. I think it's one of the most interesting groups in Europe. Essentially it's a cluster of, it's an incubator, as well as a number of other different things. So could you just start to describe to your best ability what the Oslo Cancer Cluster is for the audience, please?
Yeah. So, I mean, you see it behind my shoulder there. So it's, in short version, it's a non-profit member organization that is established to ensure that the knowledge we generate with all the excellent researchers, both in Norway and abroad, can impact patients' life. And to do that, one of the initial ideas that the founder Jonas Einarsen and the late Kåre Norum, was that we need to gather the small companies and different companies working in oncology. So that's the reason why we put up an innovation park where we gather the oncology milieu. And there's no coincidence that it's there, because all the rest you see behind me here is Oslo University Hospital at the Radium Hospital, and that's one of the largest cancer hospitals in Europe. And it has around 60% of the cancer patients in Norway go through Oslo University Hospital. So it's kind of a nucleus of patients coming in and then companies that are gathered there. And this was the basis for Oslo Cancer Cluster. And then the innovation park was built as part of that. Incubators put up. And then we're working on different projects. We can mention some of them going later, but that was the background, yes.
Okay, so you're a facilitator and an ambassador at the same time. So how many companies now make up the cluster?
It's around 100 companies that makes up the cluster. There is no ambition to grow the clusters in amount of members. The most important point is to build an ecosystem where everybody contributes and you see a place for the contribution of expanding this. We have companies that are on site. Thermo Fisher was just confirmed they will be part of our new expansion. We have small companies in Norway, but we also have companies in different European and US-based companies that are members and join our meetings when they are in Norway or digital.
What are the advantages for a small biotech to join the cluster? How do they gain from a membership?
The different ways. So you could say the most obvious is that we have built up a large and are expanding our lab capacity and office capacities. So if you're a small startup companies and you can join as 2, 3, 4 people, and you can use lab facilities with cleaning and cooling and also facilities that are fairly expensive and production facilities. That's one part of it, which you share then with other companies, but you have your own separate part, which you then can keep your stuff in. The other part is that you can meet and connect with experienced people, large companies, companies that, if you're looking for an investment round, meet investors, or meet a company that just recently performed an investment round and the learnings or connections that could be shared. And we really it's very important that it's a sharing culture. And that has been the basis from the start. And that's also the basis where we're working. And you could say that from an incubator point of view, we have gotten feedback that it's a very collaborative culture. And then I thought, so why is that happening? And I think that it's many reasons, but maybe one is also that, unfortunate, cancer is one of the biggest social challenges we have. Around half of us will get cancer during our lifetime. That means that there's normally no question about market size. It's about making it happen, make your technology work. That means that in difference from maybe other areas where the market is very limited and you have to share it. In this sense here, if a cancer vaccine work, that will benefit other cancer vaccines, to say it simply.
Okay, and the cluster is also involved in a myriad of different areas in cancer, including AI.
Yes.
It intrigues me. So could you tell me something about the AI component of the cluster?
I mean, that's on different levels, right? So we have worked with governments to see what kind of structure do we put on the health data and health technology to enable AI to be used. We're in discussion, with how is that implemented in hospitals? How could that be used for documentation purposes? The cancer register is part of the innovation park. How do we use our registers, our health data? And then cancer society, so the patient organization is there. How do we gather data from patients in real world situations? So all these levels is about how do we get data in? How do we qualify those data? How can we make them usable? Then the other part is, so what kind of applications? How is it so that I, as a physician or a professor, or how can I use these data for decision support or to help progress? And there's been different avenues there. So one company I was part of funding myself was a company called Dumar Diagnostics. And what is this company do is to use artificial intelligence on pathology images to improve diagnostics in different cancer types. And I think that this area of using AI in if it's image diagnostics, if it's data series diagnostics, if it's for companies to evaluate clinical trials, I think we have just seen the start of how this technology can be used. So this is a very promising area. And we are now planning the expansion of Innovation Park. We are building now just behind me here, 7,500 square meters building. And we are planning over there another 40,000 square meters. And then the idea of what kind of data infrastructure, what kind of biobank infrastructure do we put in a place where we have around 60% of the cancer patients coming in? We know that we have to diagnose them better. Precision medicine in what counts. That means we know there will be gathered more data. We need to put structures on how to do that, how to analyze that, and how to follow patients up. So there will be a huge opportunity area here with a lot of industry being born. And I think that Norway and Europe, in that sense, UK as well, is a international place where this can happen. In US, you won't have the personal number, you won't have the health system that you can follow up patients like this. So the innovations you put up to ensure that your population is healthy and patients get sooner and better healthy, that's the cradle is here, really.
I think Norway's leading in precision medicine. Can you tell me something about the Connect and the Impress programs that you're part of?
Yeah, so the basic idea behind the program, for the listeners who don't know them, that's really based on the idea that we have drugs currently that are used for one cancer type. We know that cancer is not necessarily, it's a genetic disease. So we could say that a genetic disease, a genetic change that happened in one cancer in your bladder could maybe also impact if it's brain cancer or colon cancer or others. how the system works like today is that you are approved for your location. So you're approved for breast cancer or another. But what if we use the genetic information to decide where to treat? So the whole idea about this is that you take current drugs on the market, you take the genetic change, and you look, can it be used for other areas where patients have the same genetic change? This is really the future of cancer treatment, and it's showing good promise. It's called a drug protocol. This is used in many European countries. And I think that this is not only how you treat, but it's also how do you then work with companies and governments to ensure that when you find a positive signal, meaning you see that in this change of your genetics, you can treat a type of cancer you cannot today. On how do you prove that? How do you ensure that the government approve and also the companies can deliver that medicine? That's really one of the more interesting parts of this project right now, because we see it works.
Is your organization involved in any way in the screening programs that are involved in Norway, for example, lung cancer?
So back me here in the middle part of this building, the National Cancer Registers. That's registers that are special for Norway and the Nordic region. More countries has it right now, but the idea is that every patient that get cancer for the last 70 years and going forward is in this register. And it also then performs screening programs, different screening programs, has done some of them for many years, and breast cancer, for example, and looking onto different cancer. So it's not Oslo Cancer Clusters organization that do this, but it's the cancer register. I can tell you one story about this. So because one thing is to do screening, but then we looked at what we know is that we screen inefficiently, right? So some people you should follow up because they're on high risk. You should probably follow them up more often. So this was on cervical cancer. And some people may just need to be checked every 10 years, and that's enough. So how do you do this? So then we took the cancer registry people together with advanced technology experts in Lawrence Livermore Labs, national laboratories in the US. And they sat together and say, are there patterns we can find in the 70 years of data we have on how these disease and the screening is progressing that can help decide who do we follow up more clearly? So this collaboration on precision screening, if you call it like that, was taken up as Biden as part of the Moonshot program. It's also mentioned in the UN as an example of international cancer collaboration. So I think that shows only some of the potential that we can have if we have good milieus on the data science, especially now in these days, looking at the data to see how we can help to screen and follow up the patients more efficiently.
I think the interesting thing that I've seen in Norway is that many people aren't aware of your ability to conduct clinical trials quickly and effectively. I think one program was Cantar. Is that correct?
I can't recall that name, but you hit the sweet spot when it comes to clinical trial.
Yeah, I think that's where you excel.
Yeah, so this is really, yeah, I mean, there are many countries that are very good and pointing out to clinical trials, but I think that the fact is that we are now on the cusp of how will clinical trials change, and how do we perform it, how do we follow it up, and I think also what I would call regulatory innovation. So how do we assess? How do we have dialogue with the not only EMEA and the FDA, but also the individual countries on how you approve and get paid for your drugs and technology. And this is where I also been very engaged and also was part of funding a company called Nordic RVE, where we look at how can we develop and use the registers and the health data we have in the Nordics to accelerate clinical trial and clinical development.
I think the Nordic.
Yeah,
go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. No, go on.
No, I mean, this is also like NHS. I mean, The Economist put up some month ago a statement, if I recall correctly, where it says that if you want to test your medical technology, come to NHS, we have the systems. And I think this attitude from the government is also something we see in Norway coming. And I think it's very important to see how can we utilize the systems we have for efficient and universal health system that follow patients to be able to learn which intervention works, which doesn't, and how do we follow up and weed out the one that doesn't work and get introduced and sooner applied the one that works. And
Okay,
you know, I can talk for hours on this, but one example I think it's interesting is that Europe has now put up an effort called cancer missions. So it's 5 missions, and one of them is cancer. And if you look at them, the goal is to help improve lives for 3 million people and by 2030. And then you have to look at how can we use then the the European area to be the place where you test out and find out these kind of innovation doesn't work. These kind of innovations we need to introduce. And that is a unique opportunity for Europe to put focus on this and actually be the test bed and be the place where you develop new drugs.
Okay, let's talk about the team of people that work with you. I think you've got some pretty remarkable individuals who've done some amazing work in the last few years. Could you tell me something about how many people are working in the cluster and something about some of the interesting, sorry, they're all interesting, some of the members of your team, please?
Yeah, I mean, the administration, I mean, in the total cluster with all the companies, there's many hundreds, if not 1,000 people in all the companies. But if you look at the small team we are that are running this in the incubator, we have very experienced people, scientists that have joined now and see how can we make this happen. Experienced business people that have, established many companies. And we use kind of because we are really trying to converge and get to help to work together. How do you get the science part right, the details right? And how do you get that into a commercial setting so that the cash flow is secured going forward? So, I mean, I'm as you say, there's a fantastic bunch of people working in the incubator, working in the Oslo Cancer Cluster. And I think that it's also their motivation and dedication to what we're trying to achieve astonish me every day.
Fantastic. I couldn't agree more. You have some wonderful people. I'm very interested to know you. I think the audience would be very interested to know more about the events that you hold every year. You hold an amazing array of different events and networking events that small biotechs and small molecule developers could get involved with. Could you tell me something about that?
Yeah, I mean, we have some regular events, but then obviously, you also need to think, okay, so there comes a COVID. What do you do? What kind of meeting places for the ecosystem do you develop in this instances? And I think that we also always try to, evolve what we're doing. But some of the things that we have had fairly steadily is something called Cancer Crosslinks, where we gather, really look at different areas of science and business and see how we can make these people, experts on each side, meet, work together, and have really good speakers from internationally coming to enlighten that. Another example is International Cancer Cluster Showcase, where we have gone together with different oncology expert milieus, different parts of the world, from Chicago to Paris to Boston, and really looked at gathered together interesting pipeline companies and projects from these areas, and then have them present and discuss together. We've done this in connection with Bio International. Then also NLS Days, a program that runs in Sweden and Denmark. We are also partnering to see how can we build the oncology ecosystem and oncology innovation milieu. Personally, I also sit at the board of Karolinska Innovation and Holding. So we also then, see how can we utilize the Nordic collaboration between the countries. And it's very interesting to see, innovation ecosystems are always different, but they also have some common challenges, and you can recognize them. And I think it's very interesting to see how we can learn from these different milieus and see how we can progress it.
Interested in the department, the organization that you have that does precision immunotherapy.
Yeah.
That some of the outcomes or some of the work that's come out of that particular organization has been quite astounding. And I know that a number of countries are interested in the work that's been done there. Can you tell me something about that?
Yeah, so like in the 70s, nobody really believed that immunology and oncology had so much to talk about. And there were some researchers at the hospital and the Institute of Cancer Research here that still tried. And Gustav Gaudenok and others was then looking into, we really believe there's something here. And I think that, I mean, it's been obvious for everybody after COVID to see that, you know, there is an understanding here. But I think that we also see cancer vaccines in different ways. We have many companies in that area, from Ultimovacs to Vaccibody to the Targovax. There are many companies, and I think that the idea that you can use the immune system to trigger and treat patients instead of a more or less targeted molecule, that idea that was very foreign in the 70s and 80s is now very commonplace. And you see that many of the things happening now try to utilize the immune system, try to understand it and manipulate it so that we can really make cancer be a chronic disease and not a deadly disease.
Fantastic. I think it's happening more and more that I see across the world with vaccines against various cancers. And that's something that I know the centre has been involved in. An amazing amount of work. Can you tell me something about the future direction of the cluster and what you've got planned for the next 5 years?
Oh, there's so much exciting things that will happen. I think that overarching is that there are two things. One is that we will build physically building that can expand the ecosystem around precision medicine. And that was what I alluded to a little earlier, that we will have infrastructure of 50,000 square meters in addition to expansion of the hospital. And then it's what kind of collaboration with companies, if not only the traditional biotech ones and the pharma companies, but also the technology companies, the lab companies. How do you put up the infrastructure for real precision medicine happening? That's really will be a focus, and that's very local. Then if you look at the more global, that would be how do you deal with cancer as a societal challenges in the range of cancer missions in Europe, right? So, and this is more, this could be international. It's not necessarily only linked to EU's effort. This include definitely also UK and US in that regard. But it's more like how do we see the challenge with how do we improve precision medicine? How do you follow up patients after they get treated? And how can you utilize different parts of society to do that? How do you stop talking about digital health, but actually apply products that get reimbursed and get paid for and can be part of a treatment plan? How do you make accelerated approval efficient and also targeted for the new world of precision medicine? How can you make cell therapy and radiation therapy? What kind of structures? How local need to be? How regional hubs need to have? All these are part of what we're going to involve ourselves in the coming years.
All right. Thank you very much for your time today. I'm very grateful. I think what you're achieving in Oslo is amazing. And I think that the future is looking very bright for the cluster and the people who you've brought under you. So again, thank you for your time, and I look forward to talking to you again in 6 months as things continually unfold in Oslo.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to that.